Our chief guest himself has a background in the banking sector, so we have the opportunity to hear from him now. He began his professional career at Citibank, where he became the vice president, and then moved to the National Development Bank as the CEO, and he transformed the NDB group under his stewardship. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics and politics and a master's in economics from the University of London. He is also an Eisenhower Fellow. So please welcome the Honourable State Minister of Finance and Mass Media, Mr. Eran Wickramaratne, as he says a few words.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador, the Deputy Governor of this central bank, the advisor to the Prime Minister, Mr. Ratwatta, who made sure I was going to be here, the Chairman and the Board of Berendina, partners, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here this evening and even to participate briefly in the sessions that you are having. I was going through the profile of Berendina, and I was also looking at what BMIC had actually done, and I must truly say that I was very impressed because I'm a little familiar with the microfinance area, more broadly with the development area. I realized as I was reading and understanding the profile that you were truly in development. Often economists try to measure things, and financial analysts, we try to measure things always in terms of numbers, and we have models, and then we think that the situation on the ground is probably at least close to what our numbers and models are. Your poverty-focused approach is laudable. Also, we just heard on the screen that you offer the lowest effective interest rate, and I noticed that in the past year it was 26%, and that is amazing considering the rates that I have been hearing more recently in the microfinance sector. You've also dispersed about 3.5 billion rupees, and I quickly grossed up your, if you want, CSR contribution, if I might call it that, because being a non-profit and actually dividending out the profits you make for social ventures, which I grossed up quickly, which was about 100 million rupees in the past year. I think it's really amazing what you have actually done based on the loans that you have given in the past year. I must say that I was truly amazed to read that you held hands or trained 45,000 people. I hope I'm right, because I looked to actually see whether I've got a knot wrong. Coming from working in a multinational bank and then coming into Sri Lanka's National Development Bank and eventually heading the National Development Bank, I know what is involved actually in holding hands, training and mentoring people, and training 45,000 people is no mean achievement. I must say that looking at your company, BMIC, it's certainly a company which both has a head and a heart, I might say. Development actually requires both if we are to actually succeed in development. Just a few weeks ago, there was a massive procession in the Jaffna Peninsula against microfinance institutions. And microfinance institutions which went there post the conflict or post the war went into probably a situation that they hadn't fully understood. As a result, maybe with good intentions, of strengthening the hands of the poor and also looking at women-headed households, maybe there was some competition between institutions. They have increased the indebtedness of the population, particularly in that province. They probably did not understand that they were dealing with more than interest rates, numbers, graphs, and statistics in that situation. They were dealing with a traumatized population. The high interest rates were ultimately seen, and the good intentions were ultimately seen to be unethical, and therefore many representations have been made to government. I'm glad to note that your approach is completely laudable. As many things have been said on microfinance, I will not be saying anything more on microfinance because you are the specialist and I'm the outsider. But I might conclude by saying a few comments more broadly on the Sri Lankan economy. Because I think everything we do, even in alleviating poverty, needs to fit into the big picture and into the direction that the country is taking. We have had modest growth rates. We have been in the 3 to 4% GDP growth rates, unlike the growth rates of a decade and a half ago. As India and China speeded ahead, the other countries in Asia, even like ourselves, had growth rates of 6 to 8%. Now we are on a low trajectory across the region and also as we look at the world economy. But our desire is not to be in the 3 to 4% growth rates, but to be more into the 5 to 6% growth rates. 2017 has, however, closed on good figures, the macro management of the economy. As we look at exports, we see that exports have grown, and in the January to August figures, we were growing at about 9.23% more than in the previous years. If you looked at foreign direct investment, which was about $800 million in 2016, it grew to $1.63 billion, doubled in 2017. And as we look at the budget deficit, it has been coming down over a period of time, with an aberration in 2017, where in 1 year we had both floods in some provinces of the country, while we had a drought in nearly 20 districts of the country. And therefore, there was an aberration in terms of the budget deficit, but the budget deficit has been coming down. For the first time in 50 years, the primary balance in the budget has been positive. And the primary balance is the budget deficit minus the interest payments that government makes. For the first time, it has been positive in nearly 56 years. Since our government took office, we have improved our relations with our traditional markets, both in Europe and in the US. And as a result of removing the EU ban on fisheries, we have been able, just in the last year, increase our exports to the EU by 38.69% in 1 year. And I think there is tremendous scope, even probably for those who are in the micro sector, to basically benefit somewhere in the supply chain. We have also been able to resume our free access to Europe on GSP+, and therefore this applies to nearly 6,000 items from which we could benefit over the next few years. The 2018 budget presented by the Finance Minister Mangala Samaravira focused on creating entrepreneurs, and that's why the budget was called Enterprise Sri Lanka. Our government's policy is to make Sri Lanka a hub for the South Asian region. It is our government that is pursuing free trade agreements with China, Singapore, and India. Just a month ago, after 18 months of negotiations, we concluded our free trade agreement with Singapore. This free trade agreement is very different to the agreements that we have had in the past, which are subject only to goods. This covered services, investments, e-commerce, intellectual property rights, and telecommunications. And what does this signal? This signals that Sri Lanka is open for business, and we want to be more outward looking. This agreement is important, and it is a part of our new national trade policy. So my concluding remark is that we need to have a more global mentality. This is an island which has been trading east and west for nearly 2,000 years, where we have had Sri Lankan ambassadors sent by our kings into the European courts nearly 1,000 years ago. While East Asian countries have dominated the global supply chain in the past, with China's restructuring, there's opportunities for countries like us and for Sri Lanka. We are the latecomers in this area. We have a historical gateway between East and West, which hasn't been exploited for 70 years. Our future lies in being the gateway to South Asia, just like others became the gateway to Southeast Asia. So while I fully endorse your great efforts in poverty alleviation, we need to connect the supply chains right into the bigger companies and the bigger markets to raise the living standards of all Sri Lankans. Thank you once again for inviting me to be here this evening.